Let's see, should I take the V-Strom or the Africa Twin? With the pandemic mess going on for the last 2 years and still ongoing, I haven't been able to pull off any of my longer, more epic rides such as the Dalton Highway in Alaska or the North Cape in Norway as in previous years. For 2 years now, I've been trying to ride the Dempster Highway to the Arctic Ocean in Canada and then return to the Dalton Highway to Prudhoe Bay in Alaska at some point in the near future. I've planned and booked those trips 3 times now over the last 2 years and have had to cancel them 3 times now. So lately I've had to limit myself to more local, shorter rides, which hasn't been all that bad because at least I'm getting out there and riding. It was time for another one of those shorter rides to a place I've never been before in Colorado, one called Shelf Road, which was a major route for stagecoaches and freight wagons traveling between the Arkansas Valley and the Cripple Creek Gold Mining District in the late 1800s. But that's for another future video. We're talking about motorcycles right now. The big question for me this time was, should I take the V-Strom or should I take the Africa Twin? V-Strom or Africa Twin? My 2014 V-Strom DL1000 has always been my reliable, dependable, and loyal go-to bike. Everything is all set up just the way I like it, and I feel comfortable and confident on the V. On the other hand, I haven't done one single ride on the Africa Twin since the day I bought it 18 months ago, other than a few short rides around the neighborhood to test out modifications and accessories I've added since that time. As comfortable and confident as I am on the V-Strom, it was time to put the Africa Twin to work, even though I've never ridden Shelf Road before and I didn't know what to expect. I got everything set up on the Africa Twin as close to the setup as I have on the V-Strom as I possibly could over the next couple of days, like switching my tank bag from the V-Strom to the Africa Twin, among several other creature comforts on the AT that I'm used to having on the V. It was time to straddle the Africa Twin and go for a ride so I could experience what it was like. For those of you who haven't seen my previous videos on this bike and are unfamiliar with it, this is a 2018 Honda Africa Twin CRF 1000 with DCT or dual clutch transmission. And an interesting little side note about the bike, it was previously owned and used by videographer Michael Bielecki to film the Northeast Backcountry Discovery Route movie. Michael added lots of modifications to the bike before his Northeast BDR trip, and I added and changed a few after I purchased it from him. You can see all of those modifications in my previous 2 videos about the Africa Twin, and the links will be either in the description below or on the end screen at the end of this video. I'm certainly no expert at reviewing motorcycles. This video is just some observations and thoughts of my first time taking the Africa Twin on the road, and off the road. But you will be at least getting honest thoughts and opinions from an average, everyday, run-of-the-mill adventure motorcyclist like a lot of us are. The first thing I always notice when I climb onto the AT is I feel like I'm climbing into a fighter jet cockpit. Not that I've ever flown a fighter jet before, but that's what I imagine in my warped little mind when I see the stacked-looking instrumentation with its triangular shape. The information is easy to read, and the only difficult thing about it for me was having to look in different areas on the dash for the same information as I'm used to seeing on the V-Strom dash. The first day of this ride involved about 80 miles of interstate highway, which had about 11 miles of construction. I had one slight incident though, and unfortunately I didn't have the camera rolling at the time. My front tire planted itself in a gap between the new pavement and old pavement at about 60 miles per hour, sending me directly towards one of those big concrete barriers. I'm going to let myself believe that the nimble handling of the Africa Twin allowed me to recover from that situation without crashing, as probably just about any well-designed adventure bike would do anyway. It's too bad I didn't have the camera running at the time. It would have made for a great video clip. I tend to have the camera off and miss some of the greatest opportunities, like the first and only time I ever dropped my bike on the Dalton Highway in the middle of nowhere. But I did have the camera on that time in Norway when I forgot to pack my brand new iPad back in the top case. Okay, I'll let you see it one more time. That's for another video too. I figured the 164 highway miles I would be riding today might give me a pretty good idea of how comfortable the seat would be. Comfortable seats are a big thing in my book after suffering for nearly 7,000 miles on that terrible stock seat on the V-Strom during the Alaska trip. Even though the seat on the Africa Twin is not the stock seat, but a Seat Concepts modification, I thought I'd mention it anyway. It was beautiful. Not even a hint of discomfort on this whole trip, highway or off-road. When stopping at red lights, I was reminded that the Africa Twin is a little bit taller than the V-Strom. I found myself more on my toes on the AT than on the V. This highly technical reenactment shows the difference between the two bikes on a level surface. But it wasn't causing me any serious issues, so I didn't really care all that much about it. After the 80 miles on the major interstate highways, it was another 70 or so miles on two-lane highways with plenty of curves and plenty of straightaways to test the response of the AT's gutsy 1000 cc's and the response of the automatic transmission when I pull the throttle requesting more power. For the handful of times I've ridden this bike over the last several months, it's never seemed to be a problem. I felt confident, comfortable, and like I was riding an old friend sitting on the Africa Twin for these last 150 miles of highway pavement. It seemed as though the Twin and I were finally starting to develop a relationship. The bike was starting to show its character to me and I was liking what I was seeing. Then it was time to transition from pavement to gravel. This was the very first time I'd ever ridden the Twin off of the pavement. I switched over to gravel mode. I didn't really notice much difference, but didn't expect to either. I just assumed the bike would do its thing and I'd leave it at that. I was a little apprehensive on that very first gravel curve, but after coming out of it without plowing the AT into a barbed wire fence, I was feeling pretty good about riding on that loose gravel. As I approached my cabin where I was staying for the night, on the mostly dirt primitive road, I was excited about continuing my ride tomorrow morning to Shelf Road on the Africa Twin. which I was starting to really enjoy riding. The next morning I loaded my gear back up, probably about 45 to 50 pounds worth, and made my way back to the gravel road where I would follow it about another 20 miles north to the town of Canyon City. Dropping down into the Arkansas Valley, the gravel road is very steep, and the DCT did its job of keeping me in a gear that made the steep gravel road manageable and safe. I was determined to let the Africa Twin do all of the shifting of the transmission on this whole trip and not use the manual transmission mode. After all, I can do all the manual shifting I want to do on the V-Strom. I was curious to see how well the DCT in automatic mode would perform in all the different road conditions it would face on this trip. About 20 minutes after passing through Canyon City, I found myself at the beginning of Shelf Road. Once again, this video is about the Africa Twin and not about Shelf Road. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be uploading a video about Shelf Road itself in the near future. Once I rounded the first few bends on Shelf Road, I was right on the edge of what appeared to be about a 200 or 300 foot drop. I just had to pull over to take some photos and fly the drone. That's where a subtle little annoying thing started with the Africa Twin. And it was something so insignificant, I can't even believe it became an issue. Every time I parked the bike on what appeared to be a relatively level part of the road, it seemed as though the bike would easily fall over to the right with the slightest bump or even a slight breeze. So then I would feel inclined to reposition the bike on a part of the road that sloped more to the left, resulting in making it quite a struggle to lean the bike back in the upright position to continue my ride.
Jesus Christ.
It wasn't always easy finding that perfect spot to park the bike on this off-road track. I'll get back to the rest of this ride in a minute, but when I returned home from Shelf Road, I was determined to find a way to prove my suspicion that the Africa Twin is more upright while leaning on the kickstand than the other bikes I've ridden. I decided to perform a very unscientific experiment. Both the V-Strom and the Africa Twin have SW Motec foot extensions on the kickstands, so the comparison should be relatively fair. With both bikes on the center stands, I figured the most plumb part on the bikes would be the wheel and tire. I first checked to see how level the floor was. Then I checked the number of degrees for each bike as they stood upright. The V-Strom was 1 degree, as was the Africa Twin while upright on the center stands. Then I put both bikes on their side stands and checked the number of degrees of their lean. The V-Strom was 14 degrees, and the Africa Twin was 10 degrees. 4 degrees is enough to alter the way I park this bike, but not enough to be disappointed with the Africa Twin. I'll manage. But I thought perhaps the previous owner may have made some adjustments to the suspension, and that's why there's less of a lean on the kickstand. It was easy navigating all the controls on the handlebars, which I didn't expect. I thought I'd be fumbling around looking for turn signals, horn, mode buttons, etc. They all seemed to be placed in what felt like a natural position on the bars, which was nice because I'm usually operating 2 or 3 cameras and sometimes a drone all at the same time as riding. And not having to manually shift the transmission was an even bigger bonus. Shelf Road has a variety of surfaces, from smooth, flat dirt and gravel to some semi-rocky, uneven sections with varying short hills and dips. I would rank it as a very slightly challenging ride for beginners, but still a good test for the Africa Twin's automatic transmission, which is what I was most interested in testing, learning about, and becoming more familiar with. I had absolutely no issues maneuvering the AT on any of these surfaces. I felt like I was in total control at all times, no matter what the situation. The Africa Twin feels well balanced and solid. Going into this ride, I thought for sure there would be some things about the bike I was going to have to get used to over time. But as far as the ride and handling goes, I felt like I've been riding this bike for 10 years. For those interested, I was riding on a set of Dunlop Trailmax D610 tires, and the ease of this road was absolutely no challenge for these 80/20 tires. I noticed that oftentimes I kept wondering when the transmission was going to downshift climbing up some of the short but mild hills, because the engine seemed to begin to bog down and lug at times on some sections of the road. But it always seemed to finally drop down a gear just as I was considering popping it into manual mode and downshifting with the shifter paddle. On the other hand, the opposite also happened a few times. I'd be picking up speed and wondering when the automatic transmission would upshift as the RPMs were wrapping up more and more. Tempting me to reach for that manual shifting paddle once again. But the DCT came through as always before that was necessary. It also seemed to me that the AT transmission was very anxious to shift out of first gear, a little prematurely in my opinion. To be fair, this all may be due to my somewhat slow crawling riding style on these back roads. But still, with all that said, in my opinion, these were minor things that are not going to break the deal. I realize this video played out in some parts like a V-Strom versus Africa Twin video, but being the owner of both motorcycles, it was hard not to bring the V-Strom into play. Overall, the Africa Twin handled like a champ. It was easy to maneuver over the varying surfaces of Shelf Road. It was truly a fun bike to ride, and the only time I was disappointed was when Shelf Road ended in the town of Cripple Creek so soon. Not once did the Africa Twin make me feel uneasy, awkward, or disappointed. I was thrilled. And if all goes as planned, the next challenge for this bike will be the Dempster Highway to the Arctic Ocean this coming spring. Or maybe I could just fly there.